Welcome to Livestock Podcast. I'm Bruno Pedreira, Senior Director for the Beef and Forage Center and also a Forage Extension Specialist. I'm here today with Dr. Katie Mason, our UT Extension Beef Specialist, to talk a little bit with Dr. Louis Strickland. How are you doing, Dr. Mason?
I'm good. Ready for another podcast.
Good. Let's talk about Screwworm Orme, Dr. Louis Strickland. Happy to have you here.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you made time in your agenda. We know that you working as our extension veterinarian in the Department of Animal Science has been busy in the last few days. So let's start this conversation, try to understand a little bit what's going on and how we should be prepared to be here, right, Katie?
Yeah, so we'll just, dive right into maybe a little bit of history about the screwworm. So it's recently been reported in Mexico, even though it's been absent for a while and it's kind of moving. So tell us about, this is not entirely new territory, right? We've had some history with this here.
Yes, this fly and larva, which is actually the problem. It's not necessarily, I guess you got to have the fly to have the larva, but the larva is what causes the big problem. And it's actually been around since the 50s and 60s. It was eradicated kind of in the mid 60s, and now it's rearing its ugly head again.
Okay. Uh, let's talk about the actual risk about this. It there is a chance that it can get into the US because, as Katie mentioned, it is already in Mexico. We have been trying to work to stop it there, but what what can we do here in terms of being the southern US, and what are the risks that it's going to make through and arrive here?
Well, first, kind of going over what are the risks. And what's different about this fly, or the larva, once again, I should say, is that it burrows into living tissue.
Okay.
This is not like your typical fly that you would see that would lay larvae and feeds upon necrotic or dead tissue. This fly lays the larva that then burrows into maybe a fresh wound or even fresh tissue. And what's really odd about this little larva, it's got biting mouth parts that literally look like a handlebar mustache. And that's what burrows into the fresh tissue. Then as it burrows in, infection sets in. And if that infection is not treated, if it goes for too long, the animal can become septic, and USDA is even reporting that deaths can occur because of this larva that the fly lays. As far as any kind of economic risk, this is a big problem. This is one, like I say, was eradicated back in the mid 60s. And because of the economic impact that it can have, we want to get it under control before it gets any further north. It's about 700 miles south of the borders. Last report, it's on the Guatemala-Mexico border. It's on down, so it's not like it's at our border just yet. But the problem with this fly is it can travel on anything. A bird can carry it. And if there's a person that goes down into that area and travels back here to the United States, they can carry it with them too. So it's not that it necessarily has to be on a bovid. Now, back last year, the border was closed because of this, and then for a brief time, the border was opened again for trade. And then, of course, it was under strict surveillance. As long as the strict surveillance was going on both sides of the border, the trade could still go on. But since it's been found now about 700 miles from the border has been closed again.
Okay.
And nothing moving across. Once again, strict surveillance regardless. And also, the USDA is going to go back to the same exact way it was eradicated first time, through using sterile flies mating with the females. When they lay the larva is now sterile, it can't reproduce, and eventually they die out.
You shut down the cycle.
Yeah. So it breaks that cycle. So I know that funding has been allocated for that to be done. Now, how soon it's going to be implemented, I'm not sure. I've not seen that, but it certainly has a big economic impact. Saw this in Beef News about a week ago that there was a false report of the screwworm fly being in Missouri, which was completely false. But even though that was out there, cattle prices went down $2 per hundredweight.
Oh, wow.
And this is not just cattle. This can be all species, even humans can be affected by this fly. So this can be horses, cattle, sheep,
Any,
birds, humans, anything can be affected by this larva.
so help me to understand this. So I understand if we bring an animal that has a wound with the larva, we were going to have the problem. But if we're just crossing the border, you mentioned we can bring it in, right?
Mhm.
Where is it going to be? In my boots? Or how does it move from there to here? How does it start a new cycle here?
Yeah, and of course that flies, all that fly needs is a meal, and it can lay multiple eggs.
Okay.
So once it starts laying those eggs, and of course those eggs are going to reproduce, especially if she's had that mating before, she can reproduce and lay those larvae, and that's going to be the problem. And it can be anywhere on your personal self. It can be inside your shirt collar and you don't know it. Potentially it could be in your hair, on your hat, and of course the animal's the same thing. It could be in their fur, whatever. It can travel any sort of way. And like I said, once again, birds.
Hmm.
That bird can a
Yeah.
migratory bird could
Can
pick it
bring
up
it in.
and
Yeah, a little bit harder to contain than
a little
some
harder to
others.
contain that
Yeah.
migratory bird.
So if there were an outbreak to happen here, or if we, start to see this in the US, what would be the early warning signs to look out for? How would someone identify that this might be happening?
Okay.
Ron?
What I have been warning owners, and there's pictures everywhere online if you want to look for a picture of one of these flies, but it's a unique looking fly. It has orange, it's about the size of a housefly,
Okay.
roughly that size. And it has orange eyes and a metallic blue thorax that has 3 dorsal stripes right down the middle. So once again, if you're out and about, you're looking at your animals and you see that particular fly, or if you see a wound on an animal that's going, okay, I don't remember a wound being there. I don't remember dead tissue being there. That's something to report, because it will burrow into that live tissue, and then it will die and cause necrotic tissue. The tissue will. So looking out for animals that are agitated, that seem to be acting odd, that do not seem to want to rest, those type things, and then investigate that animal. And of course, if you're out there, just out and about, and I realize this will be difficult because one cow can have over 300 flies on them, but still, if you see an odd looking fly, that metallic looking blue, that is a telltale sign to get in contact with somebody that is proper authority, and that would be somebody from Department of Agriculture, the State Department of Agriculture, even your veterinarian or extension agent, just anybody to get in contact with to say, hey, I'm seeing something odd. Would you come look at it? Because I promise you, they would rather you call them over nothing than to just let it just slide.
Sure. Yeah, don't want it to get bigger.
You already mentioned a little bit, Lou, but how prepared are we in terms of surveillance and diagnostics and quick response? We had it in the past, so
Sure.
we know how to deal with it,
Sure.
right?
We know how to deal with it. And I know surveillance has been going on. There was actually some surveillance going on in Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, actually. And I don't know if they necessarily were just stopping trailers as they came along, or if it was load your animals up, bring them up. And I don't know exactly the premise of what was going on, but I know there was some surveillance going on. I promise you, all sorts of surveillance is going on at the United States-Mexico border.
Okay.
But it is a big concern that we need to be watching out for.
Okay. So if you're a farmer, report as soon as possible.
Correct. Report.
If you were an agent
let
and or
somebody know.
veterinarian
Yeah.
that you got into a case like this, report as well.
Report, let somebody know. I will say this, there are control measures that can be taken. The typical organophosphates, pyrethroids will keep these flies off from the animals, but that is not what we want. We want an eradication method. We want this to be eradicated, not just controlled.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna ask about, just in general, thinking about protocols to keep any of these pests off of livestock. Just, you want to give us a quick, summary of what you tell folks to keep flies off of cattle.
The just typical fly control, any kind of pyrethroid, either whether it be a pour-on, ear tags, back rubs, sprays, anything of those natures is what will control this fly. Just your typical fly control. One thing that I always mention though, when I'm talking anytime I talk fly control, Make sure you're using the same class of chemical in all of your fly controls, because the last thing we want to do is create a resistance in this particular fly.
Mhm.
So use all pyrethroids in all your control methods or all organophosphates. Don't mix the two together.
And how often you should rotate them?
Yearly. The typical recommendation is to go at least 2 years with one product and then swap for that year and then go back again to that original product. So that is the typical recommended protocol.
Mhm.
How much do you think it can be economically a big issue, right? Because if we get into this, we may need to close borders as well, by states or
Correct.
something like this. How do you think it could affect us in the state level if we get it in the country?
I could see this affecting not just the cattle industry, as we mentioned before. This could be any livestock. This could be any small ruminant. This could be any equine, any bison, any of the livestock. This could have a huge economic effect, especially trade, any sort of protein sources, leather industry. I could see this where this could really cause a big problem.
So time of the year to keep the eyes.
Be watching, be paying attention to what's going on. And one of the recommendations, and this comes directly from USDA, and I completely agree with this too. Once again, be vigilant about watching, but also being careful with any of your procedures you may do on the farm, castrating, dehorning, making sure you're not doing that at the time of year when flies are really populated.
Mm.
Prevention. I think
Yeah,
that's the word.
prevention is the big word. Prevention.
Awesome. Anything else that you want to add to our farmers in Tennessee before we wrap it up this?
All I got to say is pay attention and make sure you stay in contact with the state, or like I say, your extension agent, your veterinarian. Just don't, once again, they would rather you call over nothing
Yeah.
than to let something slide. So report it. The state certainly wants to know it. Dr. Samantha Beatty, which is our state veterinarian, has been talking about this since January, because we had a meeting with veterinarians in January and she was already putting out the word then.
Mhm.
So they want to know. So don't just let something slide. Tell somebody.
Excellent. Today we had the pleasure here to speaking with Dr. Louis Strickland, again, professor here at the Department of Animal Science and Extension Veterinary. Thank you so much for sharing this thought with us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That's kind of something that we have been trying to have here in the Livestock Podcast, to be able to provide with Tennessee farmers with the best of information we have on this.
And also, put this little pitch in there too. You can always get in contact with us through UTB webpage, but I also have a webpage of my own that you're able to send in questions in. It's askdrlew.tennessee spelled out .edu.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lou.
You're welcome.
We hope to see you all in the next Livestock Podcast with news about beef and forage.